They say a good person is always available, always there, always understanding, always ready to give more. But reality is quieter and far more complicated. Sometimes the moment you stop being available for everyone, something strange begins to happen. People change. Conversations feel different. Relationships shift. And the same people who once expected your constant presence suddenly start noticing your absence. Why does this happen? Why does the world react so strongly when someone who is always there finally steps back? There is a silent psychological shift that occurs the moment a person stops offering unlimited access to their time, their energy, and their emotional space. And that shift can reveal truths that were always there, hidden beneath habit and expectation. In this reflection, something deeper will be explored. What really happens when someone stops being endlessly available? And why can that single quiet decision transform everything? Let's begin. Some people do not become always available in a single moment. It happens slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. At first, it simply looks like kindness. The character sits on a couch, phone glowing softly in his hand. A message appears. Someone needs advice. Without hesitation, the character smiles slightly and begins typing back. A few minutes later, another notification appears. Another friend, another question, another small emotional storm that needs calming. The character leans forward, elbows resting on his knees, replying carefully, thoughtfully, as if every word matters. And to the other person, it does. Because people remember the ones who listen. They remember the ones who answer. The ones who show up when life becomes heavy. The character stands up, putting on a jacket quickly after receiving a call. Outside, streetlights glow as he walks through the quiet night to meet someone who needs support. Not because he must, but because something inside him says helping is the right thing to do. And this is where the pattern quietly begins. Each time the character answers quickly. Each time he shows up immediately. Each time he sacrifices his own time for someone else's crisis. A silent expectation begins forming. Not out of cruelty, but out of habit. The human mind adapts quickly to what is reliable. The character is now sitting at a desk late at night. His laptop is open, unfinished work glowing on the screen. Yet his phone buzzes again. He pauses, then picks it up. Another long conversation begins. Days pass, weeks pass, and slowly, something subtle changes. The character has become the person everyone turns to. The dependable one, the understanding one, the one who is always there. But something else begins happening beneath the surface. Something far quieter. Because when someone is always available, people stop noticing the effort behind it. And when effort becomes invisible, value can quietly begin to fade. Kindness has a strange psychological effect. At first, people appreciate it. They notice it. They thank you for it. They even admire it. But the human mind has a quiet habit. It quickly adapts to what is constant. The character is sitting at a small cafe table, phone resting beside a cup of coffee that has already gone cold. His laptop is open, a task waiting to be finished. But the phone lights up again. Another message. The character glances at the screen, sighs softly, then picks it up and begins replying. Fingers moving slowly but carefully, choosing words that comfort someone on the other side of the conversation. Minutes pass. The coffee remains untouched. This is how availability slowly reshapes relationships. The character walks through a busy street while listening to a voice message through earphones. His head nods gently as he listens to someone's problem. Even while crossing the road, his attention stays focused on someone else's emotions. Helping has become routine. Listening has become expected. And without realizing it, something subtle begins forming in the minds of others. The character is no longer simply a kind person. He becomes something else. Reliable access. A place people can go whenever they need emotional relief. Another evening arrives. The character sits at his desk again. A notebook lies open in front of him, perhaps something he planned to do for himself. But before the pen touches the page, the phone buzzes again. He pauses, looks at the notification, and once again picks it up, not because someone demanded it, but because the pattern has already been built. Here is a quiet truth of human psychology. People rarely question what is always present. When something is constantly available, the mind begins to assume it will always remain that way. And slowly, appreciation can transform into expectation. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just naturally, because predictability removes the sense of rarity. The character leans back in his chair, phone still glowing in his hand, the room now dim and quiet. And in that silence, a quiet question begins to form. What happens when the person who is always available isn't anymore? Change rarely arrives with noise. Most of the time, it begins quietly. One ordinary evening, the character sits at his desk again. The familiar glow of his phone lights up the room. Another message appears on the screen. The same pattern, the same expectation. For a moment, the character looks at the notification, but this time, something is different. He does not pick up the phone immediately. Instead, he leans back in his chair. His arms slowly cross over his chest as he stares at the screen in silence. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of awareness. Because somewhere along the way, something inside him has begun to notice a quiet imbalance. The character stands up from the desk and walks toward a window. Outside, the city moves as it always does, people rushing, lights flickering, lives unfolding. But inside the room, a small shift has already begun. The phone buzzes again. Another message, another request. This time, the character places the phone face down on the table. For the first time in a long while, he does nothing, and something strange happens. Nothing collapses. The world keeps moving. But somewhere else, reactions begin forming. A few hours later, the character walks peacefully through a quiet park, hands in his pockets, breathing slowly, his phone resting silently in his pocket. Meanwhile, messages continue appearing. Are you busy? Did you see my message? Everything okay? Curiosity appears first, then confusion, sometimes even discomfort. Because when someone who is always there suddenly becomes less available, people notice. The character sits on a park bench, watching leaves move gently in the wind. His phone vibrates again, but this time he simply looks at it, then slips it back into his pocket. And this is where psychology reveals something powerful. Availability creates emotional structure in relationships. When that structure changes, the entire dynamic begins to shift. Some people begin reaching out more. Some begin pulling away. And others start wondering something they never questioned before. What role did this person truly play in my life? Because when constant presence disappears, silence begins revealing the truth. Absence has a quiet power. It does something presence cannot. It reveals. For a long time, the character moved through life like a bridge, connecting people, supporting them, carrying the weight of many small emotional storms. But now something has changed. The character walks slowly through a quiet street in the early evening. The sky is fading into deep blue, streetlights beginning to glow. His hands rest calmly in his pockets as he moves without hurry. His phone vibrates once, then again, but this time he does not rush. He simply keeps walking, and slowly, something unexpected begins to appear. Not in the world around him, but inside his relationships. Some conversations grow quiet. Some people stop reaching out entirely. The character sits on a wooden bench beneath a tree, watching people pass by. Laughter echoes from a nearby cafe, and the wind gently moves the branches above him. His phone remains still beside him, and in that silence, something becomes visible. Some relationships were built on connection. Others were built on convenience. It is a difficult truth of human nature. Sometimes people do not value a person. They value the access. The character lifts the phone and scrolls slowly through old conversations. Long threads of advice, late-night support, thoughtful messages that once filled entire evenings. And yet now, many of those voices are quiet. But something else begins appearing too. One message arrives. Short, simple. Hope you're doing okay. Another appears later. Miss talking with you. These are different. These are not requests. They are concern. The character smiles faintly, placing the phone back into his pocket as he leans back against the bench. Because absence does something powerful. It filters. It separates noise from meaning. And slowly, quietly, it reveals a truth many people spend years trying to understand. When availability disappears, authenticity begins to appear. The people who valued only the access slowly drift away. But the ones who value the person remain. Something subtle begins to change after a person stops being endlessly available. Not in the world around them, but within themselves. The character wakes early one morning. Soft sunlight enters the room as he sits quietly at a small desk with a notebook in front of him. The phone rests nearby, silent for once. Instead of reaching for it first, he picks up the pen. For the first time in a long while, the day begins with his own thoughts. The character later walks slowly through a quiet park path. Trees sway gently above him as he moves without urgency, breathing deeply, hands loosely in his pockets. Nothing dramatic has happened. No arguments, no grand declarations, no confrontation, just a quiet decision to stop being available to everything so he can finally be present for something, himself. And something surprising happens when this shift occurs. Life becomes calmer. The character sits at a small cafe again, the same place where his coffee once grew cold while he answered endless messages. This time, the cup remains warm between his hands as he slowly takes a sip. The phone lights up on the table. He glances at it, then calmly flips it face down again. Not because people no longer matter, but because balance now matters too. This is what boundaries really are. Not walls, not rejection, not selfishness. They are clarity, a quiet understanding that time, energy, and emotional space are not endless rivers. They are wells, and wells must sometimes be protected. The character stands from the table, gently placing the cup aside before walking back into the rhythm of the day, calmer, lighter, more grounded than before. Because something important has changed. He is no longer living in reaction to every demand around him. He is choosing when to be present. And that small decision quietly reshapes everything.